Alright, welcome back guys. In the previous video we profiled down this blank so that it would be nice and square. So the squarer that you have the blank, the easier this next step will be. So this next step is going to be shaping the rails. How do you do that? Well, there's a few different ways you can do it. One way, the way I started off, was you would just work down the top, the deck, and the bottom on the rails, and you would count how many times you went down each side to keep it even, and then work it out until you found a rail that you kind of liked. A lot of the pro shapers, they use that technique, but for us more intermediate and beginner shapers, I like to use something called rail bands. And what that is it entails marking out where you're going to remove foam first and then removing the foam. So you get it, it's a much more precise way of doing it, but it's a little bit slower and it takes a little bit more planning. And if you don't really have an idea of how to do it, it can sometimes be a little bit challenging. However, over at Green Life Surf Supply, they have some really good literature around shaping rail bands. They have some good literature around shaping boards, period. So I encourage you to go over there and check them out. I think you need an account in order to get some of their documents and read some of their board building material. So anyways, go over and check that out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of the ways to shape these rail bands and how I learned, based on their documents, how to do it. But I'm just going to kind of wing it on my own. So I'll show you the documents, kind of roughly how they do it, and then I'll show you how I will mark this out. Alright, so here are some documents from Green Life Surf Supply, which is where I got these documents. So I encourage you to go over there and check it out. I'm not sponsored by them. These just happen to be some documents that I learned how to shape boards. I'm not trying to plagiarize them, I'm only showing you guys, so I encourage you to head over there and have a look. Now, just basically how to do it really quickly is, so we have marks here for a boxy rail band. There's also like a knifey rail band, basically for more of a short board. A boxy one is a little thicker, so you probably use it more on like a long board, a fish. And then they also have a diagram for different types of surfboard rails here. So you can, or a table I should say, and it gives you some of the rough dimensions. Now one thing that's key is your board might be slightly different, just like my board is a different thickness than this board, because this one here, it's for a 2.5 inch thick board, so these dimensions would really only work for that. So it's not going to work for me anyway, so I'm going to kind of just wing it, but I just want to show you kind of how to do the technique. And what you will do is you're going to make 2 marks on the board, corresponding at 1 foot down from the nose and 1 foot up from the tail and 1 at the midpoint. So you're going to make a mark here and here, which corresponds to this mark here. So in this case it's 4 inches and then 2 inches. And then up on the side, on the rail, and that's why this is so important, to make sure that your surfboard is nice and square, right? I'm going to measure up, well in this case I mean up 1 5/8. Up here you're going to go 1 inch, and then down at the tail you're going to do 3/4. And then you're going to take a dowel and then connect the dots all the way through, so you get nice rail bands. And that's why they call it rail bands. So you're connecting them. So using a dowel will give you a nice arc. And then what you will do is you're going to remove the first chunk of foam on this edge here first. So you're going to remove that one. So you remove this part, this piece of foam, and this foam. And then you're going to draw at the midpoint of the foam that you just removed. So make sure that's nice and flat. And then you're going to connect the dot again. And then you're going to end up with a second mark, which will be really hard to show here because we're not actually doing it. But when I do it, it'll be much more apparent. And then you're going to remove, once you connect the dots on that, is you're going to remove this chunk of foam here based on the midpoint. So remove this section first, then this section. And then on the bottom, what they call the tuck, is you're going to remove the foam, same thing. You'll make a mark in 3/8 and a mark in up 3/8. Connect it. Well, you probably won't even really need to connect that. You can just get an idea and then just remove that foam. And then you blend all of it together. Now, It depends, like you could remove more than 3/8 or you could remove less than 3/8 depending on what type of rail you're going for. So that's kind of how you do it. So I'm going to mark out my board and just kind of wing it based on just looking at the thickness and how thick I want the rails. First thing we're going to do is we're going to measure a foot from the nose and a foot from the tail, and then we'll mark the midpoint as well. So for my first mark, I'm going to measure in 2 3/4. I've already kind of marked it here. And then on this side, same thing, 2 3/4. Just want to make sure. Mark it a bit more on an angle because it's going to be more like this, like that. We're at the midsection of the board. I'm going to measure in 4 inches. Do the same on the other side. And then back here at the tail, I think I'm going to do 3 inch. And again, this is 1 foot up. I'm also going to mark down what this is, just for reference. So this is 3 inch. And I like to keep a journal of this, so I'm going to write this in a book. And then I'll do the same on the other points as well. The next mark, and I'm going to do 1.5 inches. So right about here. And I'm going to mark at 1.5 inches. Same on the other side. Here I'm going to just go 1/2 of what it was. So I'm going to go 2 inches. And since this is 3 inches, I'll go maybe an inch and... maybe I'll go 1.5 inches, sure. Actually, I want to have a little more float, so I think I'll do 1.25 inches maybe back here. Reason why I probably went a little thinner back here is I don't have as much foam back here, so I'm gonna just leave it a little thicker instead of going in a little bit further. Now it's time to join the line. So I need a weight and a dowel, a very flexible dowel. As you can see, this one's already all marked up from previous boards. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay it on my first mark here. And then I'm gonna put a weight on it here. The nose I'm going to work on later to kind of figure out what lines I want on it, but for now I'm going to worry about the main marks that I've done. So I'm going to line it up and I'm going to kind of follow it. I'm going to give it a little bend and just give it a little curvature and see if it looks good to the eye. I'm going to look down it from here. Just make sure that it looks good. There's nothing weird about it. So what I've done is I've just connected the 2 dots, and now I'm going to take my Sharpie. I'm just going to draw a nice arc. Right like that. So I got my nice arc. It looks nice and smooth. I'm going to work on the nose here later. I'm probably just going to kind of bring it up like this. So I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to line this up on my middle mark and following the previous line. And then just make sure that I'm lined up on the back line. Make sure that the arc seems okay. Again, look down it, make sure that it doesn't look weird, and then draw a line. end the tail, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll probably end it right like this. So this here is my first line that I've made. And it's got just a slight little wave in it, but I'll compensate for that when I'm shaping it. So it looks pretty good at this point. I'm going to draw out the rest of the lines. So just follow this simple technique. So I flipped the board on its edge, and now it's time to mark the sides. So I'm going to transpose the halfway mark here. So this is the halfway point. And the thickness of my board is about 2 3/4. So I'm thinking I'm going to go maybe about 1.25 inches from the top down. So this is the amount of foam I'm going to remove right here. Not a little bit more. A little bit less than halfway. So I don't want to go below halfway because I want my rail to be just a little bit thicker, but not so thin that the rails will sink in the water too much, but not so thick that the board will be corky and it'd be hard to bury a rail into the wave. So I just kind of gauged it halfway, and then went up a little bit, which is about 1.25 inches. Here's a little more of an up-close view. So my total board thickness is about 1.75 inches. So 1.75 inches, we'll take a half, we'll round it off to about 1 3/8. So I'm gonna go up from that, and I'll do maybe 1.25 inches. So I'm gonna go about 1.25 inches. So that's that mark here. So it's a little bit more, or a little bit less than halfway. So I'm gonna remove this much foam. Same thing at the nose. I'm going to transpose my 1 foot mark to the side here. So here I got about 1 5/8. I'm going to mark it maybe down, maybe, I'm going to say 1/2 inch. So that's going to leave me with approximately 1 inch and 3/16 or so. So this is just approximate. So I'm going to do up from the bottom. I'm going to measure so I know for the other side. About 1 inch and 3/16. So I'm going to mark that. I'll mark the midpoint too so I know to transpose on the other side. We'll come back to the middle here and just measure to double check our measurement. So we're about 1 5/8. Just about 1 5/8. So 1 5/8. So we know for the other side. At the tail, again, transpose the 1 foot mark from the deck over and measure, and this one's about 1 3/8. So I'm going to maybe go 1/4. Actually, I'll do 3/8. What the heck? So that leaves me with 1 inch measuring up from the bottom. And we'll mark the other side with the corresponding points. Now it's time to play connect the line again, just like we did before. I'm going to use a weight. I'm going to weigh down this side of the dowel, and then I'm just going to connect the 2 lines, and then using my Sharpie I'm going to draw a line. And And then here's up close on the nose how I do this. I just kind of bring it to one of the other lines just to connect it, just to give it a spot to land for now, and then I'm going to shape this by eye because this nose is hard to connect all the lines. So I've brought this all the way back. Just a nice sweeping curve. So I just want to show you real quick what this back line looks like on the rail. So you can see I've brought it up all the way through with the dowel, and then here it lands kind of very close to this other line here. This was just by eyeing it, just kind of bent it until I thought it would make a nice sweeping curve. Back here I'm probably going to round it down, but this is just going to be the start to at least get the profile of the rails. So as you can see here how the lines land. Everything looks nice and rounded. Nice sweeping curves. Nothing jaggedy or weird. You want it to look good to your eye. What looks good to your eye will probably work better than something that might be measured precisely, but it probably won't ride that well. To mark the tuck of the board, it's slightly different. The tuck is going to be right here along these edges here. But the back portion, the tail of the board, is not going to be rounded. So I'm going to measure up about 20 inches and mark. So I've already marked it here, about 20 inches, because this is where the fin placement will be also. You want a nice rail back here that will release water, because this is where you're doing a lot of your pivoting, a lot of your turning. So you're going to want a nice 90-degree so that water will release off of a hard edge. So when you have a nice sharp edge, water will release off of this edge. But if you have a round rail, the water has a tendency to wrap and follow it, and it will not release the water as much. So a hard rail at the tail releases the water. But there's also, exceptions to all the rules on how some of this works and how it works with each other. So, I encourage you to do some research around how water releases off of rails and, shape one to your liking. So I've measured 20 inches, and then I'm going to mark this 20 inches here. And this is going to be the mark. To mark the tuck and draw the bands for it is same as before, but I'm going to mark this one at around 3/8. And then connect the lines. As we get up closer to the nose mark, I'm going to fin it down. I'm going to do 1/4. And then back here, I stopped at the 20-inch mark, right here. Now I'm going to do the side, and then repeat on the other side of the board. Alright, the rail bands are marked out. You can see the tuck is marked out on the bottom, and then it ends here and it turns into a hard rail. Here it'll be a soft rail. Back here it'll be a nice hard edge to release the water on the tail. Okay, so we're done marking the rail bands, and I've decided to split this video into 2 parts because this video was marking the rail bands. The next one will be shaping the rails and finalizing the shape of the board. And it was starting to get just a little too long, so I thought I would split it into 2 parts. Okay, so thanks for watching. The next video will be coming soon on shaping the rails and removing the foam after we made all these marks from this video. So thanks for watching. Until the next video, bye.